It's week 8 of the NFL season. Here are 5 players I'm getting in my fantasy football lineups this weekend. All right, so we're starting with Tyler Allgeier of the Atlanta Falcons. And before we get into why exactly Tyler Allgeier makes sense this week, we do need to acknowledge that we have 6 teams on bye this week. So for running back specifically, that means no Gibbs, Montgomery, Genty, Kyron, Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet, ETN, whoever the Cardinals starting running back is. All these guys are off the table. So we're up against it from a bye week perspective. And on top of that, Bucky Irving remains out. Amarian Hampton is still on IR. So our options are really as limited as they've been at any point this season. Now, starting the Falcons' second running back may seem dangerous, and ultimately it kind of is, but the Falcons are this week's lucky team. They draw the Miami Dolphins on the schedule, and I know we go through these numbers every week, but once again, the Dolphins are last in EPA. They're last in EPA per pass, and most importantly, they are last in EPA per rush on defense. Now, because the Browns are the Browns, the Dolphins are actually up to 29th now in defensive success rate. So seeing some progress there, but this still remains the defense you want to target for fantasy running backs. Even in a game where Miami knew exactly what the Browns were going to do over and over, we still saw Quinshon Judkins run for 3 touchdowns. Miami still held him to 84 yards on 24 carries, which is a borderline miracle, not that bad. But this game will not be played in the wind and the rain in Cleveland. We're back to Atlanta now in a dome. I know Michael Penix is banged up right now, but the Falcons are still a threat to beat you through the air in a way that Cleveland just isn't. So Miami can't just totally sell out against the run here. Bijan Robinson, of course, having an incredible season, yet Tyler Allgeier already has 4 games with double-digit carries. He had 16 against Minnesota in week 2, 16 against Washington in week 4. He split the red zone carries exactly evenly with Robinson so far, 13 apiece for each back through the first 6 games. Allgeier's actually seen more work inside the 10 and inside the 5 than Bijan has. I think this game ultimately looks a lot like that Minnesota game back in week 2 where Atlanta essentially played not to lose, kind of took the ball out of Michael Penix's hands. They're not going to ask Penix to throw the ball 30 times here. Tyler Allgeier, I think he could see 14, 15, 16 carries. Definitely an RB2 territory for me this week. Another running back I like for week 8, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, coming off a big game against Cincinnati, that is one of the best defenses to target for running backs. Gets a much tougher matchup this week going up against the Green Bay Packers. Packers should get Devontae Wyatt back for that defensive line. So on paper, not a great spot necessarily. Even so, given the bye week circumstances, I'm still rolling Jaylen Warren out there. That's due in large part to the fact that he's still clearly winning the playing time battle over Kenneth Gainwell. Gainwell had a big game against Minnesota when Warren was out, but in that Thursday night game against Cincinnati, we saw Warren outsnap Kenneth Gainwell, dramatically outcarried him 16-3, even out targeted him through the air. Not expecting a huge game against that Green Bay defense, but the hope is that Warren can see 5 or 6 targets. That's something he's already done in multiple games this season. And the Steelers just don't have a ton of other options in the passing game. I mean, we had 3 different tight ends catch a touchdown last week. That is just not going to be sustainable week to week. There's a reason Aaron Rodgers has the lowest ADOT in the NFL. He's throwing to running backs at the 2nd highest rate in the NFL, behind only the San Francisco 49ers. This isn't going to be another 16 carry, 127 yard type of day for Jaylen Warren. But again, with the injuries, with the bye week stacking up, I'm still rolling him out there. One more running back to consider this week, Isiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. And look, I know trusting any of these backs in Kansas City, it feels dangerous week to week, but I'm willing to roll the dice on Pacheco. It's been tough sledding so far. Those first 3 or 4 weeks especially were rough, but hopefully you held on to Pacheco. The KC offense and the running game in particular continues to pick up momentum every single week. Chiefs are once again big home favorites over the Commanders. You won't have Jaden Daniels on Monday night. This should be a spot where KC can once again play with a lead. They can lean on that running game in the second half. You know, workload-wise, Pacheco has played 63, 77, 56% of the snaps over the last 3 weeks. That's a notable increase overall from earlier this season. And that number last week would have been significantly higher if the Chiefs did not pull their starters after the 3rd quarter in what was just a colossal beatdown of the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, we know Kareem Hunt is going to be involved. Maybe he vultures a touchdown at some point. We'll see. But Pacheco's the guy I'm counting on for volume and what should be another plus matchup. I know we saw a lot of Brashard Smith late in that game against the Raiders. That was just garbage time. 10 of his 14 carries on the day came in the 4th quarter. I think the Chiefs want Isiah Pacheco to be the guy. I think this is a good matchup for him. I'm putting him in my lineups. Looking at the tight end position, Cade Otton is a player I'm willing to throw in my lineup this week. We talked about Otton as a kind of desperation option a week ago, obviously at tight end, maybe even as a flex in some deeper leagues. Tez Johnson ended up scoring the lone touchdown for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but it was Cade Otton who led in catches. He led in receiving yards, went 7 for 65 on 9 targets. Now, Baker Mayfield did throw the ball 50 times in that game. They were playing from behind the entire time, so you can't always count on that kind of volume, but Otton has now gone 4 for 81, 5 for 51, 7 for 65 over the last 3 games. And I'd like to see him get some looks in the red zone. Hopefully that comes around. Either way, the Bucs are without Mike Evans for essentially the rest of the fantasy season. Chris Godwin is out again this week. Emeka Egbuka should be the go-to guy, but still think we see plenty of Cade Otton. Saints are allowing 7.4 yards per target to tight ends on the season. They've allowed 4 touchdowns already to tight ends. Otton still out there on plenty of waiver wires in shallower leagues. Maybe you grabbed him already. But again, with the bye week setting in, no Sam Laporta, no Brock Bowers, no Trey McBride, Darren Waller landing on IR. Go grab Cade Otton, and I think you could start him with confidence this week. We'll finish out with a wide receiver, and we are going to Odunze of the Chicago Bears. And I know he's been closer to an every week start so far this season, but 2 rough weeks in a row now for Odunze after that great start. He had 5 touchdowns over the Bears' first 4 games, had a huge game against Detroit in week 2, then 2 for 32 against Washington, 2 for 31 last week against the New Orleans Saints. Look, weather was a factor in that Commanders game. Caleb Williams did not play well, I thought, against New Orleans last week, and the Bears have been running the ball so well that their overall passing volume has just decreased over these last few weeks. We'll see how well the Bears can run it on Baltimore this week. I mean, that's probably option number 1 for that offense, and really hard to say what to expect from the Ravens coming out of a bye, getting some key pieces back. But with Lamar Jackson now expected to play, I think the Ravens are going to score points on this Bears defense. The Bears are going to have to keep up. I think we do see more volume for Caleb Williams. And for as much as the Ravens have struggled against the run this season, they've been even worse against the pass. And this started well before all those injuries set in. Entering week 8, Baltimore ranks 30th in the NFL in EPA per pass. They're allowing nearly a 70% completion rate, 14 passing touchdowns given up in just 6 games. I really like this as a rebound spot for Odunze. Still in the top 15 in the NFL in terms of team target share. Caleb targets his receivers at one of the highest rates of any quarterback in the league. I think Chicago really tries to test that Baltimore secondary. So even after a couple of duds, I'm confidently starting Odunze this week.